Hi, I am Nick Glaze. I'm the Managing Director of Red Stag Media, and I'm here to present the next instalment of our Agri Marketing Mastery video series. And today I want to talk about case studies, because case studies really form an important part of any marketing strategy, and this is particularly the case in agri. So what are case studies? Well, a case study is an example of your product or your service solving a real-world problem for a real-world customer, and that's really important. The real-world nature of this is important, because to have credibility in your case studies, to have a degree of authenticity for your brand, you've got to find customers that are happy to talk about how your products or services help them solve a real problem. There's absolutely nothing to be gained from anonymizing case studies or anonymizing testimonials. If you don't have customers that are prepared to put their name to what you've achieved for them, then quite frankly it's going to do exactly the opposite. It's going to detract from the credibility of your brand, because it makes it look like, well, you couldn't find somebody who would put their name on the line about what you've done, or you may have just even made it up completely. So we've seen this before, where businesses have made up or certainly published case studies without a client name in, and it just detracts from the credibility of what they're trying to achieve. Okay, so why use case studies? Well, case studies are a really powerful form of communication because they're peer-to-peer communication. At the end of the day, if you are involved in an industry, a sector, and this is particularly the case in agri, you're more likely to listen to your competitors even and your peers in that industry, people facing the same kind of issues that you are on a day-to-day basis, than you possibly are to a brand or a business trying to sell you something. So if you can achieve great results with customers and they're happy to speak to them, then their peers will listen to them and listen to those case studies and look into how those problems that they're facing were solved and how you solved them. So they're a very powerful form of communication. They add what we've talked about previously, which is third-party accreditations to your marketing communications. And these are very important. This is really the difference, as we said before, between PR and advertising. Now, advertising is for me to say Red Stag Media is great. And you'd expect me to say that because I'm the MD. I own the business along with a fellow director. So you would expect us to go around saying Red Stag Media is great. But if a client of ours says Red Stag Media is great, they achieved more than they promised, they got fantastic results for us, then other businesses are much more likely to listen to that. And that's the third-party accreditation element. It's somebody outside of your business, one of your customers, the people you've worked with, actually going on the record and saying, yes, these guys are fantastic. And that's what good quality case studies enable you to achieve, and that's what they bring to a brand. So what format do we produce case studies in? Well, there's essentially two formats for case studies. Written case studies, which companies have used for time immemorial, essentially, and then unsurprisingly, video is gaining a lot of ground in terms of how to broadcast and how to produce case studies. When it comes to written, that might constitute a long-form piece of content such as a report. And that's very useful if you've got a very technical sales process, if you've got a technical product that solves a number of different problems. You might want to produce quite a long report where you work closely with one of your clients to sort of identify all the different facets of their issues that it helps to get over. You might want to go, take a deep drill into how the product works. You might want to take a deep drill into the data. Those are the types of things that you would use a reported kind of case study for, and that sales collateral is very useful, very powerful when you've got a long sales process with a complicated product. You need to explore with potential customers, all the different facets of that product before they're really going to be convinced that it's the right solution for them. So that kind of report is useful in that circumstance. However, most of the written case studies you see tend to be quite a lot shorter than that. They tend to be fairly scannable, and they tend to be hosted on websites, company websites. So if you go to a website looking for a particular solution for your business, and you will read maybe the web copy to find out if the company looks kind of right for you, but then very often people will click on the case study section of a website, and this is going to demonstrate to that potential lead on your website the caliber of clients that you work with, which is important. If you're working with big brands, if you're working with companies that are well known, of course that's going to lend a lot of credibility to the products and services you supply. It's going to give them If you have multiple case studies, it's going to give them a good overview of the range of services you provide, and it's also going to give insight into how you're capable of solving people's problems, or indeed delivering, performance improvements or improvements to the bottom line, whatever they might be. So very often, those are your two kind of main form of written, long form in reports or shorter form on your website, and of course they then make useful fodder for social media, for example, maybe e-newsletter content and things like that. So there's lots of different ways you can take those case studies from your website and make sure that they go quite a lot further. So what about video then? Well, video across all marketing communications is growing in popularity, particularly as video, high quality cameras and editing software become relatively cheaper. It's now much more accessible. So brands are using video a lot more, and that includes us. We produce a lot of video for clients because it's such an engaging format, and it's a format which is only going to grow and grow and grow. So that's one great reason for looking at video case studies. But other reasons are, if you take a video of somebody, actually it's more of a three-dimensional type of communication than just written communication. And actually, you can start to tell from that. You can really buy into the fact that this customer is enthusiastic about your product. You can see how they communicate with the camera and how they come across on the camera. You can see, if what they're saying is said genuinely. You can't always tell that with written case studies. The words might be down on paper. They might have been agreed, they might have been agreed begrudgingly, or for whatever the reason, there's no tone in anything that's written. But with video, you can see someone's enthusiasm for the company, the brand, and the solution that they provide. So that's a really good reason to start to potentially capture video case studies, because again, they speak to the credibility. They're very easy to consume. People don't always want to read long form content or even shorter form content on websites, whereas they will readily consume videos. And you get that more engaging element of being able to look at somebody and see what the reactions are and see how enthusiastic they are about the product. Okay, so that's the reason why case studies are useful and powerful, and why you really should include them in your marketing comms, and obviously the different formats that they tend to come in. So what makes a good case study? Well, the first thing that you've got to really think about is choosing the right customer. Now, if you're producing written case studies, probably the things that you want to look at are the customers either that are the biggest businesses that people will have heard of potentially, or the businesses that you've really had the biggest impact for, the businesses you've helped the most, because those are going to really create the most effective and powerful case studies that you can get. If, however, you are going to produce video case studies, of course, there's other things that you need to take into consideration. And that is how well that person's going to come across on camera. So you want somebody who's articulate. You want somebody probably who doesn't have a really thick regional accent, which of course sometimes in agri is something that we come across. You want somebody who is going to talk enthusiastically, who's going to engage the person watching the case study, who's happy to say the things that you want them to say, or certainly to say things that are really supporting the results you've achieved for this person, for this business, and you want them to be able to talk freely and not feel staged. And so that's quite a lot of different qualities that you need in somebody that you're going to put in front of a camera. So you need to choose your clients, your customers for the case studies wisely. All of those qualities, if you get them, that person's going to come across really well on camera, and they're going to convince the viewer that they're really impressed by your product or service. Anything else might come across as not being the case, and again, that might sort of dent the credibility of the case study. So watch out for that. When it comes to the content of the case study, obviously this is about solving real world problems. So you want to start to look at the problems your product or service is helping businesses to overcome, that a lot of your target market has in common, because they will then be able to resonate with what's being said, either in the written case study or on camera, and it will really have an impact on them. And of course, the bigger that problem is felt by your target audience, the more powerful that case study is going to be. Try not to include more than one or two sort of particular issues in any one given case study, because if you start to try to get a case study client where you've solved every problem for them, or your particular product might solve a lot of problems, and you've tried to sort of crowbar all of those into one case study, that's not going to work so well, because it's going to become too long, too convoluted, and you're trying to address too much within a single piece of content. If your product or service does solve a lot of problems, then create multiple case studies for the different things it solves. That's a great way of doing it. Or alternatively, if it solves the same problem but for different customer segments, make different case studies for those customer segments. So product sort of wonder crop might do wonders for wheat and barley growers, and also for soft fruit growers. But you're not going to get soft fruit growers interested in a product necessarily that the big commodity crop cereal growers are growing, and vice versa. You're not going to get the cereal guys looking at case studies for soft fruit. So you've got to you'd have to create a case study for both customer segments in that respect, because it's not going to speak to both. One case study is not going to speak to both parties. So beware of that. If you're trying to speak to more than one customer segment, then tailor your case study to each of them. When we look at case studies, as with all stories and all narratives, they should be people focused. Now, that's not to say that you don't want to use data and stats. You really do. And some of the best ways of using stats would be in headlines for case studies. So, for example, how wonder crop helped one farmer increase tomato yields by 56%. That might be a headline for a case study, because it's got that 56%, which is obviously probably quite ludicrous, but nevertheless a big figure that's going to pique the interest of other tomato growers, essentially. But once, so you've got to use data and you've got to use stats. But what we're actually looking at is pretty much expressing fairly simply how this product or service helped that particular customer, and articulating that in a fairly engaging way that's not too technical, not using hugely technical language, and not using lots of data and stats which confuses people. Now, ultimately, you want to use that to illustrate and quantify the results of your product and your service, but don't make that the central focus. The central focus really should be the experience of the customer with the product and what it did for them. And along the same lines as that, you really need to capture the customer's reaction. Now, what I mean by that is, how did it benefit the customer and their business, almost on a personal level? So if the case study and what you're doing help that person be better at the job, fantastic, capture that, because who doesn't want their life to be made easier? And that is a powerful message. If you're looking at competitors who are to that customer who are looking at this, and they're thinking about their own roles, and if you're actually making their life easier and producing better results, that's a really powerful message. How has it helped that person deliver greater performance across the board for their company, which then they report back to their board of directors? It's helping them personally, and capturing those kind of reactions, how it makes their life easier, how it makes their job easier, their working life easier, is a really useful thing to do. Don't neglect those in favor of always hard data. Hard data's great, stats are great. It demonstrates quantitatively how your product or service works and the results it delivers, but people respond more to people. And if you're making people's lives easier, capture that kind of reaction. It's really, really useful. Another important thing is that if you're producing a written case study, always include a photograph, and a photograph that includes the customer that you're talking about, or their very least their brand, because that again comes back to this issue of credibility. If a person is prepared, or a business is prepared, to put their name to your product, and a person in that business is prepared to put their picture in this case study, alongside the name and alongside the good things that they're saying about your product, that all adds to the credibility. It really reinforces the fact that this client has used your product or service and they're really, really happy with it. And that's a big thing, again, for other competitors and other people in other businesses in your target segment to see. And then finally, the final tip really, as with all marketing comms, is to end your case study with a call to action. We're talking here about a product and how it helps somebody. And as you take somebody through that journey, then you obviously want to show them where exactly they can go to get more information. So on a written case study, it might be, get in touch to find out more about the product, and leaving an email address or a telephone number, or it might be a click through to a product page on the website where they can read more about it and actually make contact with your business if they want to do that. If it's in a video, it might be showing the URL of the website at the end of the video, or giving a telephone number at that point. But whatever it is, make sure you end with a call to action and you ask the people watching it to take an action. And that action obviously is to take them that step closer to getting in touch with you, becoming a lead and getting into that whole buying cycle, and hopefully eventually becoming a customer. Case studies are among the most powerful types of content and communication you can use to persuade people to take that action. So always ensure that you ask them to do that at the end. That's about it from me. I hope you found that useful and that you can take some of those tips and perhaps start to bring some case studies into your own marketing comms, because it really can give your strategy a shot in the arm. And we'll see you again on the next Agri Marketing Mastery video. That's about it in terms of top tips for case studies. I hope you found that useful. It was a fairly quick. What's 18
minutes.
18 minutes? Oh. Right. That's about it for case studies. I hope you found some of those tips useful. Okay, I hope you found it useful. I hope you found some of the tips in there. Get this far.
So well,
I know. Right, come on, babes, you're daft. That about sums it up for case studies. I hope you found that useful. I hope you found some of the tips. No.